Obama's shoulders. Joining me now, John Stanton, Washington bureau chief for BuzzFeed, and Liz Winstead, co-creator of The Daily Show and author of the book Liz, Free or Die. Hello, guys. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
Okay, John. So you're attacking somebody's credibility, and you're going back to high school, right?
Yeah.
With some choice. I just want to read some of the other choice. A 16-year-old kid, he sued over a local school board election. He was publicly accused by his high school social studies teacher of deceptive behavior. How do you even prove that? Like, could you go dig up the social studies teacher?
Right. Well, you know, this thing has devolved into a weird personal attack back and forth, and I'm not sure that the Wildstein really, puts him in a whole lot of danger necessarily legally, but politically it sort of has. And when you start doing things like this is just horrible crisis management 101 right here. Like, you should be able to just come out and be like, I didn't do this.
Which they did on Friday. I mean, so then this was like the second and third answer, Liz, right? Like they had the serious statement, and then
he devolved into Tracy Flick, and then it's like, oh my God, Chris Christie is Tracy Flick. It's really embarrassing. I mean, if we were to dig into all of our high school past, next thing's going to be, I'm not sure he even went to our school.
Right. Nobody liked him.
Yeah, he was really a loser. Like, hey.
Well, that's almost what he sounded like he was saying in the press conference. Like, well, I was one of the cool kids, and I don't really know what he was doing. But John, the thing about it, to your point, I mean, I've done opposition research. I've seen good opposition research. It does make it seem like this is potentially a consequence of the fact that Chris Christie has lost some of that inner circle, and it kind of makes you question, well, okay, who's running the ship that would put together something like this and think it was a good idea to put it out?
Well, it does. It plays to the idea that a lot of people have about him, that he is this bully, and he's a bit immature in sort of how he handles people that are oppose him on things, and it really does highlight that.
Right.
And I think you're right that it does. I don't think anybody around him who knew what they were doing would say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to find this social teacher and highlight this guy, because this is the thing that is going to blow this thing out of the water for you.
That's going to be it.
No.
And also, Liz, the thing is, I mean, then if that's true about this guy, I'm sorry, then why did you create a position for him in the Port Authority? And just a year or so ago, Druniak, his spokesperson, Christie's spokesperson, said, quote, he's in there in that job because he's well suited to the task of playing a role in reforming the Port Authority in accordance with the governor's goals. I mean, supposedly he was the governor's eyes and ears. So you're the guy who was a loser in high school?
The big loser who I don't know is going to be the eyes and ears of this very important position that I've carved out. But the thing that I'm fascinated by is when you watch the clips play out, that usually they're shorter on the news, and we see of him attacking the teacher and throwing that kid out of that town hall.
Mm-hmm.
You will pay attention. If you let the clip run a little longer, it'll be Christie saying something awful, and then he waits for the audience response, and then he doubles down. And it happens in both of those clips, and I bet if you were to dig up other stuff, it's like he says something, you're out of here, and then the crowd goes wild, and then he walks and he stops, and then he says something more, and it's classic bully behavior because there's a performance level to bullying that is really, really just interesting, and he plays it up to the nines. It's classic.
Well, this is, I think, one of his biggest problems has always been the fact that when you get outside of New York, New Jersey, sort of the Northeast, and maybe parts of Florida, New Jersey politicians and the New Jersey shtick that he's got going don't really play that well. You go down to South Carolina.
Same beanbag,
right?
Right, it's like the Tony Soprano guy coming down and being like, hey, you guys, right? Like, nobody really outside of this region appreciates that much. And I think that was going to be his big test, was whether or not he could go down to the South for the 2016 election and shed that. And this episode is going to really stick that hard to him, which is going to be, I think, difficult for him.
Well, and
I'm from Minnesota, and that, not only does that not fly, if you go to a restaurant in Minnesota and you drop your fork, you don't ask for another one. You take that on yourself and blame yourself. It's like, well, I guess I'll just sit here then. So bullying in some of these passive-aggressive Scandinavian states is even worse. You get to the South, it's like, no.
Well, and interestingly enough, there's a story in the Washington Post today that said he was the catcher, and he was not going to be starting his senior year, and apparently his parents were thinking about consulting lawyers to see if they could block that so that he could be able to play. I mean, again, high school we're talking about. Really? Does that you see as a president?
Well, you know, I know, but I mean, who knows what other presidents have had their parents have done for them when they were in high school, you know? I think it's, but I mean, that's, it's also, it's having local politics, right, really raised to a national level. This goes on in every local area in the country. People say crazy things about each other, and they're like, oh, I remember in 8th grade when you stole my milk money.
Right, that's right.
But like now it's on the national stage, which sort of makes it feel a little embarrassing to watch. You know?
It is. It's like, oh, don't want to see that. I want to switch gears because, Liz, this morning it was very interesting. So, you know, at the end of last week we heard the Republicans might have a framework for immigration reform. They're going to try to maybe do something piecemeal. Then within their own party it started to get attacked. But the talking point this morning was, well, we don't trust President Obama, right? We've got to verify and then trust him. And that's why we've got to go with order at the border first. And it was sort of interesting that, you know, again, President Obama's sort of been trying to take a step back and kind of give them the room. But attacking the president for not having done anything on the border, I mean, that's ridiculous. The numbers tell an absolutely different story.
Well, I also think, too, again, going back to you have a problem with women and you have a problem with immigration, and when you focus on we do not trust that you are good enough to come and live here, you know, that is the message. That is what you hear when you talk about border control first. It is not an inviting place. It is not. It's like a caveman dragging tooth and nail to get them to even talk about immigration, because they just simply, the mistrust of what immigration actually means, it's really profoundly a problem.
But John, it just seems like their go-to message is it's Obama's fault. We can't trust him. That's why we're going to take action or obstruct, right?
Well, the irony is that under Obama, they've had record numbers of deportations.
Yes, that's right.
Their deportations have gotten to be the point where, you know, they said we're focusing on criminals, and they do that, and they sort of focus on criminals. But if you get caught with a credit card that you've gotten with an illegal security number, you become a felon and you get deported.
Right.
And you know, they're putting people out in mass numbers. They've got tons of people down on the border already.
And more border agents actually than ever before.
And they've been having a lot of, like, you know, human rights questions and people dying, and there are a lot of all of the things that conservatives want him to do, he's actually doing on that end. And so in this case in particular, it is a bit of a weird argument to say that he may not enforce the law.
Clearly it's what they think their base will like. So, you know, attack the president, that's popular with the base. All right. John